Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to War Thunder with Koala. So, after the success of my M1A1HA video, I decided I'd do another similar style video on something else I have a wish for, and that is British light tanks and scout tanks. Britain currently has a single tech tree scout capable vehicle in War Thunder, the FV510 Warrior, and a single event vehicle as well, the Aec Mark II. Something I definitely do not agree should have been added as an event vehicle. Seriously, the only tank that you've added to fill a noticeable gap, and it's only available now on the marketplace? Poor form, Gaijin. Really poor form. Gaijin actually stated back in February last year that Britain would be getting a lineup of light tanks and scout cars, so where they are, I've no idea. Perhaps we'll see them next update. It's really quite sad, as Britain was well known for their use of scout cars, and the playstyle of British vehicles throughout the tiers is perfectly complemented by scouting vehicles. Yet sadly, Gaijin's neglected them, and it's just one more reason the British tech tree isn't played all that much. Well, let's see if we can do our little bit to help change that, shall we? Now, I know all you wereaboos are going to be saying, Germany struggles too, and this one time, I will wholeheartedly agree with you. The lack of German scout-capable vehicles is very noticeable, especially between 4.3 and 6.3, and their one scout-capable tank, the RU-251, is behind a paywall. But at least it's constantly available. This isn't good, however. Germany does need some tech tree scout tanks between BRs of, say, 4.0 to 8.0, the SP1C being the most obvious choice, Radpanzer. But what I'm going to do is create separate videos for light tanks, scout tanks, and armoured cars for each nation, depending on how well this video does, because there are actually a ton of options for basically every nation. Italy basically has all the scout cars and such that could be added. The main thing I want to see from the Italian tech tree is the P43, even though it was never built. Sue me, I like the P40, I want another one. But we won't be doing a scout cars video for Italy, but for every other nation, there are a large number of options that could make almost an entire lineup of scout cars. But in this video, we're focusing specifically on Britain, and then in subsequent videos we'll cover the wide range of options for other nations. I'm going to focus on armoured cars for the most part. There will be some tracked light tanks in here, members of the CVRT family, the Scorpion for example, the VFM5, but mostly these are going to be wheeled vehicles, and they're all tanks that would get the scouting ability. I also want to say that these videos are not just going to be a free-for-all Gaiju please gib. There are a ton of Gaiju please gibs for every nation, and you guys know I'd have 1,000,001 for Britain, the Vickers Mark 7 or Centurion Mark 5 to name just two examples. After creating a different version of the script where I went off on a massive tangent about potential British premiums, I think I'm going to do another video specifically on that topic because there are like 20, so expect that one next week. For now though, this is not just a list of potential new additions all over the shop. We're limited to light tanks, scout tanks, and armoured cars, like the one you're seeing on screen right now. This is the T-18E2 Boarhound, which was designed and built in America, but not actually used by the US Army. It was built solely for export to Britain, which is why you're seeing it. Along with the fact that I literally never see these things on the battlefield, and it's one of my favourite vehicles in this game, honestly. It's also one that's on this list. Britain actually ordered over 2,000 of the things originally, but they reduced that order when the US decided to up the prices on us. Despite alliances in World War II, Britain and America in the mid-1940s really didn't like each other. The Boarhound was known as a heavy armoured car. It was an armoured car that actually had enough armour to deflect your average German sneeze. Actually, for an armoured car, the Boarhound had quite a lot of armour, up to 90mm on the gun mantlet and over 30mm on the sides. This is an armoured car that cannot be penetrated by 50 caliber machine guns. The original T-18 was equipped with a 37mm M6 gun, the same gun found on the M5 Stuart, but the British requested more DACA, so they put on the British 6-pounder gun, named their T-18E2, and then shipped them off to North Africa. Now, remember when I said that Britain and America weren't best of friends? Well, after showing interest in buying as many as 2,500 T-18 heavy armoured cars, the souring of that deal caused us to reduce that order quite a bit. We managed to find a nice way of getting back at the Yanks without actually angering them enough to cause lasting problems. We just really pissed them off. After making the US design and work on 3 different variants of the T-18 before we were satisfied, The T18E1 was a 6-wheeled version similar to the T17 Deerhound. We only actually bought 27 of them. Made America ship them all the way out to North Africa. Remember, the US had gone to all this work expecting a sale of some 2,000 vehicles. We still paid the fair price for the 27, mind. We didn't refuse to pay for them or anything. That was for the Soviet Union to do to us later on with the Rolls-Royce Neens we sold to them, asking them to pretty please don't put them in any military aircraft. Next minute, the MiG-15 happened. And the IL-28 as well. And they didn't even pay us for them. Whoops. So that's the story behind the T18 Boarhound, which I actually find hilarious. Such a petty way of getting back at the US. Anyway, the T18E2 in-game currently sits at BR 3.0, but I actually think it could go up to 3.3 with one specific change. See, the Boarhound, despite being quite heavily armoured for a scout car, was able to hit a respectable 80 km/h top speed on paved roads. The thing is, wheeled vehicles in War Thunder, contrary to the actual reason for their being designed, typically go extremely slowly off-road, and the T18E2 can't even hold half that listed top speed on flat off-road terrain, even on hard ground. I don't know if there are any historical sources citing that the Boarhound couldn't manage more than 32 kph off-road, but if there are, I'd assume since they were used in North Africa that if this was documented, they'd be referring to the thing's performance through soft sand, which in War Thunder is even more abysmal. It's about the same speed as the Mouse. And this is supposedly a scout tank. All armoured cars in this game tend to have this problem. They just all feel a little too sluggish off-road. Now, I don't expect the thing to actually be driving around at 80 kph all the time, but buff the average off-road speed of this tank by perhaps 10 to 15 kilometers, and it becomes a very good 3.3, maybe even 3.7 light tank, which fills a nice battle rating. That's where the Cromwell 5 sits. This change would potentially raise the BRs of the Pumas and M8 Greyhound as well, along with the Italian armoured cars and the AEC, the British event vehicle as well, which is very good, because there were an absolute ton of British armoured cars that were armed with 40mm guns, which aren't going to be very useful if they're all too sluggish to sit above BR 1.7. I also think that Tier 1 wheeled tanks should get the scouting ability and airstrike modification, which would mean they could still be used at higher tiers. Scout tanks serve a very good purpose, but currently there are no Tier 1 scout tanks because most reserve tier tanks are counted as light tanks. What I would like is for Tier 1 wheeled tanks to receive the scouting ability, and I also think that scouting someone should not only mark them with a chevron, but give an audio line such as "enemy sighted." You know, from the same guy who's always shouting attention to the map at you. The chevron would also strobe for a couple of seconds, the way it does in World of Warships when you ask for fire on an enemy ship or give a command to a friendly one. This would make scouting more likely to yield results, as often you can scout someone only for your team to get killed by them 3 seconds later because they weren't paying attention. If scouting also yielded a higher SL and RP reward, just a wee bit higher, then these changes would make the scout role an exceedingly viable one. Right now it's basically just a cheaper way to get into close air support. And what better way to encourage players to grind through the British tech tree than to give them an entire new line of scout vehicles along with the new mechanics which buff the scouting playstyle. Bet you'd add some British premiums then, eh Gaijin? Something I've also asked Gaijin directly, with zero response, is that seeing as though the French have some battle rating 1.3 tanks in Tier 2, which therefore are eligible to get the scouting ability, if the British Crusader Mark III could be put into Tier 2 and get the scouting ability as a light tank, as its battle rating is a whopping 2.7, that's the highest BR Tier 1 in the game, and there's no reason for it. It just seems like an extremely cheap and senseless way to deny Britain any scout tanks. The French have a BR 1.3 scout tank, because it sits in Tier 2, because French Reserve Tier is crap. The British have a 2.7 light tank, which is not a scout, for no reason besides Gaijin decided to put it in Tier 1. Obviously, the Crusaders, Daimler Armoured Car, and the Warrior 2 would be moved over into a new light tank line. I also think the Vickers MBTs could be moved over there, because the Vickers MBT Mark I that we have is one of the lightest, it is the lightest armoured main battle tank in the British tech tree, and yet it sits in the heavy tank line after the Conqueror and Carnarvon. The Vickers MBT Mark 7, although very well armoured, if it were to ever get added, is much faster than the Challengers that it would sit alongside, so I do think that these tanks should be moved over into a new light tank line as well. Now, I've been talking for quite a while, and we've actually only covered one new vehicle. Don't worry, I'm not going to go in depth like that for all of them. The T-18 is just one I find very interesting, and now that we've gotten some introductory things out of the way as well, let's speedroll, shall we, through some early tier armoured cars. The T-17 E1 Staghound was a lighter counterpart to the heavy T-18 Boarhound. It was designed by Chevy, carried a 37mm M6 gun from the M5 Stuart, and could achieve a maximum road speed of 89 kph. In my opinion, this would be a battle rating 1.3 vehicle, while the Daimler would go up to 1.7 with increased off-road responsiveness, as I said before, and it would be the earliest scout tank. There's also the Aec Mark 1, which carried the turret from an early Valentine, so the same 40mm gun as the Daimler, but better turret armour. Next, the T-17E3, which was a variant of the Staghound with the turret of the M8 howitzer motor carriage seen in the American territory at battle rating 2.0. This is an open-top turret mounting an incredibly short-barreled 75mm howitzer, which fired a heat round penetrating up to 90mm. Considering that the tracked M8 doesn't have the scouting ability and still sits at 2.0, I feel like the T-17E3 with this gun could sit at either 2.3 or 2.7, then being succeeded by the Crusader Mark III at 2.7. If a 75mm howitzer wasn't enough DACA for you, however, well, there's also the T-17E1 Tulip, which is the Staghound the British and Canadians decided to mount rockets to, 4 RP3s in the British case, and 8 125mm rockets on the Canadian vehicle, which I believe could be an upgrade module for that tank, which would perhaps sit as high as 3.3. There were also Staghounds fitted with the turrets from Crusaders featuring their 57mm guns, which could sit at 3.3 alongside the Tulip, and some were even upgraded with the Mark V 75mm gun, which could raise them up as high as battle rating 4.0. The British could also get the M8 Greyhound. They did use almost 500 of the things, although perhaps this would make a good premium scout car. I really don't agree with the American one being an event vehicle. I think it's a very significant historical vehicle that should be in the tech tree, or at least available constantly as a Golden Eagle premium. Perhaps, like the German Panzer IIH, a British M8 Greyhound could be made a special pack available on Steam. The Panzer IIH is something I bought for about $5 on Steam. It was a special pack that was only available through the Steam store. I think the British M8 Greyhound would fit nicely as a counterpart to that. With the increased off-road capability I brought up earlier, the M8 Greyhound could be raised up to perhaps as high as 2.0. Now, if you're worried that this seems like a lot of American-made vehicles going into a British regular tech tree, this is why I don't like that the Aec Mark II was an event vehicle. The Staghounds were of course designed for use by the British, the US never actually used them themselves, but I can see why Americans might not like this, although the Sherman Firefly is in the regular old British tech tree as well, so... Anyway, look, I think the best solution is to replace the Aec Mark II with the 57mm armed Staghound, and put the Aec Mark II into the regular tech tree, so everyone who already had the Aec would log into War Thunder and find that it's turned into a new vehicle, the Staghound 57, in their hangar, while anyone without the Aec already would all of a sudden see it as a researchable in the tech tree. Following on from this would be the Aec Mark III, same tank but with the 75mm Mark V cannon. Same deal as the Staghounds that were upgraded with it, they'd sit at 4.0 alongside the Mark III Churchill and the Achilles. That's going to be a very nice lineup. By the way, the T-17 is actually already in the game. You might notice the T-17E1 Staghound AA fitted with a dual 50 caliber turret, which sits at, I believe, battle rating 1.3 in the British tech tree. Now for the first tracked vehicle on the list, the FV101 Scorpion, featuring the L23A1 76mm low velocity gun, which fired no AP rounds, only HESH. This is a weakness, but potentially would make the vehicle a fun meme at BRC 6.0. Remember that its main job is to scout, which with the slight reworking of the mechanic I suggested earlier, is a viable gameplay style all of its own. There's also the Scorpion 90, which replaced the 76mm with a low-velocity 90mm gun. This tank would likely sit up quite high in the battle ratings as it did fire APFSDS. Not a very strong APFSDS mind, around 320mm flat penetration, but that makes the tank at least 8.0 worthy. It's about the same penetration as the French AMX-10 RC. The important thing is that it's added, not so much where it sits. I just don't have the information to say that definitively. It is very fast for a tracked vehicle at 72 kph, and unlike the wheeled vehicles, would still be very fast off-road as long as the terrain isn't too harsh. I did ask for wheeled vehicles to get a slight speed boost off-road, but not that much. This would be much more of a competitive light tank rather than a scout and support tank, similar to the Object 906 for example. Folded in with the Scorpions at the same BRs would be the mid-1950s armoured car, the Alvis Fv 601 Saladin. This 6-wheeled scout car was designed to replace the AEC, and it features an L5A1 76mm gun. Once again, only Hesh, so I would put this tank at probably battle rating 6.0 or perhaps 6.3, the armoured car version, as its main job is scouting and supporting the team. There are 2 other variants of this tank that could be added though, the first featuring a slightly different 90mm gun to the Scorpion, but the same shells, including a HeatFS shell, which I didn't mention before. It's really not a good HeatFS shell, however, given the low velocity of this gun. The other Saladin variant features the 76mm, but is also fitted with 2 Swingfire ATGMs. This tank, the Saladin with Swingfires, would probably sit at BR 8.0, as these are mouse-aimed ATGMs with a decent 500mm penetration. Once again, the Saladins would be folded in with the Scorpions, whose guns they shared, giving Britain an exceptional 6.7 lineup if you up-tier the 76mm Scouts. We're also starting to build up a very nice 8.0 lineup, which is not going to stop. A couple of interesting options. Here's the FV703 Ferret Mark II 6 armoured car, which fired the Vickers Vigilant ATGMs, which we don't see in game just yet, alongside a 30 caliber machine gun. This is a vehicle I think would make a really nice premium. I believe these ATGMs would be WASD guided, so they're comparable to other ATGMs down at the World War II tiers of the game, and this vehicle could sit at BR 6.3, I think that would be fair. The FV712 Ferret Mark V fired Swingfire ATGMs, and would probably sit at the same BR as the Saladin with these ATGMs and the 76mm gun. Usually I'd call these tank destroyers similar to the Raketen Jagdpanzer or IT-1 Draken, but I think the fact that they're wheeled makes them okay for this list, and they'd again be 8.0. I did leave out a couple of vehicles like the Vickers Viper, what a sick name, which is comparable to the Centauro or Type 16, but that is once again a tank destroyer. I'd love to see it in game, don't get me wrong, it looks absolutely amazing, but not for this particular list as we're only going over, once again, light tanks. It should get scouting though, I've said that before, I think the wheeled tank destroyers like the Centauro and Type 16 should count as scouts, give them the support role. Next up is one that would really excite me, and that is the Alvis Fv 721 Fox, which travelled at over 100 km per hour. This scout car mounts the 30mm Rarden cannon found on the FV 510 Warrior IFV at BR 8.0, which, with the improved scouting mechanics, could easily be worth an 8.3 BR, along with all the other IFVs like the Bradley, BMP2 and Type 89 moving up one step each as well. There was also a prototype of the Fox armed with 2 Milan missiles, the one seen on the Warrior, but I'm not sure this would be implemented. Perhaps it would make a nice 8.7, it only carried 6 of these missiles, so it'd be comparable to the Warrior but faster on road. The regular FV721 Fox, however, I'd suggest be put at BR 7.7, or perhaps another 8.0. Damn, Britain is going to have a powerful tank lineup at that tier. Once again, gives people more reason to start jumping in and grinding British tanks, kinda like how Japan is currently the only nation with a heavy cruiser. Last tank on this list is a true light tank, the Vickers Mark V, or VFM5. This, like the Scorpion 90, is a more traditional light tank, and is comparable to the German TAM. It mounts the very familiar 105mm L7 cannon, which is stabilised and has a top speed of 72 km per hour. It was first produced in 1986, carried only 19 rounds of ammunition including APFSDS, and would probably sit at either 8.7 or 9.0 depending on the strength of its ammunition. This would be the perfect antithesis to the TAM, which I should also mention that with the buff to scouting would move back up to 9.0, while the Bagel Panzer goes back up to 8.7. Of course, to allow for this, BRs would be extended above 10.0, that's something we've been waiting for forever, so that 9.0s can't get dragged into top tier, seeing tier 7 tanks. Actually, even 9.3s like the T-72A might start seeing frequent down tiers if we add a 10.7 BR. Anyway, that's going to be it, lads. I apologise for skimming through a lot of these vehicles without saying much about them, their history and stuff, but I'm trying to record this video very quickly, so I don't have the time to get all the details out as far as their history or anything like that. I think it's mainly important that we get down their armament and speed. None of these vehicles have any armour besides the T-18, which is already seen in game, and I'll be honest, it is more the World War II era scout cars like the Staghounds that would excite me. Britain already has the Warrior at BR 8.0, and I feel like there's far more of a meta down at low tier than there is at high tiers, where these days the 8.0 to 9.0 range is nothing but 8.7 premium MBTs, and top tier is all blisteringly quick tanks. I actually saw an old video of Napalm's today where he compared top tier to Call of Duty, and I find that both hilarious and accurate. By the way, there are a couple of potential Warrior variants that could work. There's one that fires a 30mm Bushmaster cannon with a much faster rate of fire, a 40mm cannon, one with TOW 2B missiles, which have, I think, 1100mm penetration and are tandem charges. But yeah, I guess I've just become disenchanted with top tier. At low tier, heavy tanks are well protected and slow, medium tanks are, well, medium in all regards, and light tanks are fast and fun, but also very situational and tactical. I absolutely love the playstyle of Armoured Cars and support vehicles. It's the main reason I love the T-18 Boarhound so much, and it didn't hurt that twice in this video we were playing on my favourite map in the game, Carpathians. God, I love this map. I really enjoy the unique side to the game you get being a support vehicle type, and I like the idea of making the scout mechanic more viable as a full gameplay style. I think it would really allow for some specific support vehicles to shine. Perhaps then some light tanks when they need it. The Batchat 25, for example, I don't think really gets much benefit out of it because it's not any faster than the medium tanks at its tier, and it has a nice powerful gun. It never really needs to scout tanks. That mechanic is, or was, supposed to be for tanks that can't reliably kill certain enemies and need to call in team support to do it. That's how Gaijin described it, at least when it was implemented back at, I think, the end of 2017. Either way, it opens up a lot of options for gameplay, especially for the British, who currently don't have this aspect of the game available to them, but as I said, the playstyle of most British tanks is perfectly complemented by scout and support vehicles. Now, I know the standard response to that is, they don't need it because they have the Americans on their team, but that's not really an argument. By that justification, you could give Britain nothing but support vehicles and make the same argument. You could give them nothing but SPAA and make that argument. These aren't ideas, Gaijin. Please give British tanks some love. And helicopters too. We even have Japanese helicopters now. I told you they'd get helis before the British. Look, you can obviously see how saying that giving Britain nothing but SPAA and still calling them competitive because they have the Americans on their team doesn't work. And if you forget this argument as far as light tanks or helicopters go, then all of a sudden we open up the possibility for a Britain versus America matchmaker like we see in air battles with the preparation for landing on Hokkaido map. This is something I've been an advocate for quite a while, but it only works if Britain has access to all the same mechanics that America does. The buff to scouting also just diversifies gameplay and adds a whole new level of intelligence and strategy. It's a great mechanic, I'm glad Gaijin added it, but I feel like more could be done with it to make it unique, increase the potential for teamwork, etc. If you agree, let me know, I'd love to know your thoughts as always. Anyway, once again, there'll soon be videos on potential new additions of scout cars and light tanks for other nations, so stay tuned for them, and I definitely want to do one talking about potential British premiums. There are so many that could be added, dripped into the game through updates, and I think that with a whole new line of unique tanks, and British light tanks have been asked for months, if not years, Gaijin would really benefit heavily from adding in a whole bunch of new premium tanks for Britain, because people will be buying them to both grind out the new and unique line of tanks and fill out their lineups with those vehicles. So I've got my work cut out for me over the coming weeks, and then we'll probably be getting a new War Thunder update. I'm expecting devlogs in, let's say 5 weeks? 5.5? Tomorrow's video is going to be a Quality Time podcast, more World of Warships and Koala Explains content throughout the week, but I will be doing those promised gameplay videos on the Sky Shark and Hunter very soon. Anyway, I hope you lads have enjoyed this video. Please leave a like if you have, subscribe and hit that notification bell, join the 360 squad, and let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. Do you agree with my suggestions for vehicles and their BRs? Got any others that I might have missed? And what do you lads think about fleshing out the scout mechanic? Come join me on Twitter and Twitch, join the Discord server if you want to chat with me further, and remember to check out Patreon if you wish to support the channel, or hit the join button to become a member here on YouTube. Let's get some memberships happening, guys. You get emotes and rewards, and you help me hugely with making these videos. I could not continue to do this without your guys' support. Thank you lads all for watching, have a lovely good day, and always remember, keep your bagpipes to hand, keep your kilt on, and I shall see you in the next one. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting me on Patreon. Captain Fubar, DA261, Gisli Gadarsson and Dark Recon. You lads are bra. If you wish to join them, come check out the link in the description below.